The liberal in me says the government should probably say, no, you can't. Or, you can't ban these people or stop their speech. The conservative in me is actually the one who's saying, well, they're a private entity and they're a company. They should be allowed to run their platform whatever they want and let the free market dictate it. If people don't like using Twitter, get the fuck off Twitter. And I just don't know where the hell I stand on this issue. I've jumped around a million times and I cannot get my bearing on it.
Isn't that something? Yeah, it's a very fascinating thing. I agree with both of your points. I think that's a really valid, kind of way of looking at it on both sides. And I try to always take the stance that I'm willing to listen and try to take in both sides of it. And I've told you before, I'm not 100% sure that what they're doing is banning conservatives or trying to shut down conservative ideology. I think it's supposedly the spread of misinformation. I think the idea is that there are certain groups that they're targeting because not necessarily their rhetoric, which maybe is unfair, but it's just, for example, let's use Alex Jones just because he's popular. Mm-hmm. For example, maybe it's not what he says that crosses the line. But if you can see that his followers and their subreddits and the comments and things are escalating and misinterpreting and starting to kind of galvanize in a way that could be seen as disruptive, then I understand why people would want to shut it down. And I don't mean disrupting the status quo or thought or something like that, but if it looks like it could escalate into something that was more dangerous. But it also, and I've said this before, by only eliminating voices on one side and not having a couple of sterling examples of like, oh, hey, they didn't just do that. Twitter does this to liberals and extreme leftists as well. Then we wouldn't be able to say it's perpetuating the narrative that the thought police are controlling information. So I can see from a Republican's perspective or from a conservative's perspective, it's like they're only shutting down our people. How is there not an agenda? And I said to you the other day, and I think both of us still don't 100% agree or see eye to eye on it, but that I do feel like it is that the fear of the Second Amendment nuts going and doing something violent is greater than the group of, and I know you brought up Antifa, and I know that there have been mass shooters that were not conservatives, but it seems like the group of people that's anti-gun are going to be much more likely to be the ones committing mass shootings than the ones that are afraid that everybody's going to take their guns.
Well, and then to like kind of unpack also, so did you, by chance, I would recommend watching, did you get a chance to watch the head of Twitter, Tim Pool, and Joe Rogan all on the same podcast?
Mm-mm.
So I love Tim Pool. Tim Pool is a liberal, though. He goes to bat because and literally, essentially, what Twitter really does say, if you watch the whole podcast, is like, yeah, we're biased, deal with it. That's kind of their answer, Mm-hmm. Like they pretty much they don't say that, obviously, but like he brings up so many examples, and an example he used that, so you said they're trying to stop the spread of misinformation. That was kind of their defense as well. And he said, you can get banned for saying a man is a man and a woman is a woman and a man is not a woman. You can get banned for that on Twitter. He's like, you are taking a political stance with that issue, period. He's like, you've decided that. Or I don't know if you were familiar with the Learn to Code debacle that happened on Twitter.
No.
So a bunch of years ago, when production jobs dropped, the media was like, wrote a bunch of articles saying like, learn to code. That's the future. Those jobs are disappearing. It was very arrogant, entitled, like asshole articles. So fast forward when all these but all these journalist sites are falling and all these journalists are freaking out. So people started tweeting directly at journalists who were bitching, hey, learn to code, like as a joke. Then Twitter got to the point where if you even tweeted the term learn to code, not even at anyone, they would ban you or at least give you a strike. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I just feel like, but at the same time, my thing is they are a private entity, but I don't know. I literally, like, ironically, I feel like again, the sides have switched on this. I feel like the liberal stance should be, hey, the government should step in. You know, that's technically the liberal stance, but that's the conservative stance on this issue for whatever reason. The conservative stance should be, hey, it's a free market. If you don't like it, don't fucking use it. And I feel like there's, like, I'm sick of Twitter, not necessarily for that. I'm just sick of it. That's the reason why I deleted the personal account. I'm like, I fucking hate this site, you know? And my thing is, I don't know, do you remember Sarah Jong, that for the New York Times, all the tweets that came out with her? Do you remember this journalist? So literally, you can find all of it if you search Sarah Jong about, like, they're just like super racist against white men tweets. Which is okay. And nothing happened to her. She has her account. She's never been banned. She's never received strikes. None of this. And it's, to me, a counterpoint that I was having this conversation with someone brought up, and they said, would you, I'm like, well, hey, they're private, because I took the conservative stance. I'm like, they're a private company. They can ban whoever the fuck they want. And one of my more liberal friends actually brought it up. He goes, so would you be okay with a cell phone company banning people from talking on their phones with certain ideas? And I'd be like, absolutely not. And he's like, social media is kind of the new form of communication. How do you feel about something like that?
I agree. Fundamentally, it's not a debate. It's like, if a private company decides that they don't want your ass there and they're not discriminating because of your race, gender, fucking, that list of things that they can't discriminate against you for, it's 100% their right. If cell phone companies started doing it, that would suck. But at the same time, it still falls under it's their right to do it. We don't read the TOCs. It probably says that within the term somewhere. Like, if you do things that we don't like, we can cancel you for with no consequence for that. So I don't know, man. It is like, my biggest fear about this is that it gives ammunition to the most radicalized subsect of the right wing base.
I would agree.
It's not the regular folks that, because you can still go get Alex Jones. You can still go find a lot of InfoWars. There's other places where he has an outlet to do this. But what it does is it furthers this idea of the deep state. It makes people even more suspicious to the fact that, like, they're trying to control information, and some person deems that this information isn't healthy for the world to know, then all of a sudden they're controlling and filtering out the information that we get. But that said, there is an accountability for journalists to say things that you got to cite your work. You've got to have more than one source and all these things. And these editorials where people would just go on a rant and say a million things that are in themselves dangerous with no sort of backing, and people are as dumb and as impressionable as we all are, or all can be when it comes to emotions. I feel like it's the person who creates the content that has to take the moral high ground and try to be upstanding journalists and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a tough one, man.
So one of my fears is actually kind of a similar fear that you had. Like, I feel like this gives ammo, but I also feel like this radicalizes people. So when we start saying this, you're no longer allowed in society, which social media is kind of society right now for a lot of people. And when we say you're no longer allowed in society to a group, and we kick them off, well, now they're no longer getting any points of view of the liberal side, and they're falling into more conservative voices. And they are now more susceptible to the most extreme voices within that movement. you know? And when you kind of banish people to these dark corners of society, they tend to get more radicalized, not less,
Yeah.
when you kick them out of polite conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know if the girl from the Westboro Baptist Church, her granddad, I guess, started it. She was very extreme. She was actually de-radicalized via Twitter because she was on Twitter saying hateful shit constantly. Crazy. She'll tell you, like, I watched this story with her, crazy shit. And a guy reached out to her via Twitter, was like, hey, I just kind of want to talk to you. And they started having this conversation for months and months and months and months back and forth. And her views started to change. She left the Westboro Baptist Church and now like campaigns against them and against that cult-like mentality. She became a positive voice for that instead of just shutting her out and being like, you're the worst type of person. Actually welcoming her into the conversation. And I'm a firm believer of I would much rather welcome someone into the conversation that I'd heavily disagree with and talk to them. You're not going to save them all. You're not going to change the hearts and minds of every person you meet. It's not going to happen. But you're definitely not going to do it if you just refuse to even talk to them or associate with them. And I feel like that just radicalizes them and makes them scarier people, personally.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% agree. I'm curious to see how all of this does end up playing out, because there always has been this kind of tit for tat idea. I wonder if there are going to be people that go in and start singling out tweets from previous, in this example, more liberals, so that they can say, doesn't this constitute hate speech? Shouldn't this person be deplatformed? They've been spreading misinformation in one way or another. Like anti-vaxxers, that's pretty bad misinformation. Can they get those people out of there? I don't know. But then it's like, I don't know. And then at that point, it's like we all have to watch what we say because we don't want to ruffle any feathers. And that comes all the way back around to just that stupid meme that caused me grief this morning. Is just like, it's hard. It's hard. With 1 million people, you're never going to be able to make everybody happy. And with so many people just constantly on the grind trying to get as much content out as possible, lots of times sensationalism is going to trump the well-articulated project that took days to get together, investigative journalism. None of that is worth near as much as just a person who can yell and get emotional about things that they care about,
Well, and I feel like social media and marketing companies specifically have, and we've seen this, and this is why you're seeing actually predominantly more rage-based digital news outlets are falling. They're all falling apart right now. And they capitalized on the rage bait, clickbait culture to make a lot of money. And I think there's one of them, I don't know which one it is. It's Vox or it's Mike.com. So Mike.com, I don't know if you're familiar with them. So they were like kind of the one of the people who really pushed the more left-wing rage, everything's offensive narratives. It was started by two conservative libertarian guys who were just capitalists. They didn't care. They're like, I just want to make money, and they figured out rage is the best way to make money. So it wasn't a principled thing. They were like, hey, if we can get this group of people angry enough, they retweet it more. It apparently, like middle-aged moms are the most active group on all social media, and they share the most. And so there's all these algorithms to see how they can offend groups like that specifically. Like, hey, it's middle-aged moms, so let's write a lot of articles about sexism and how this man said this, and isn't this horrible, to get reshares so we can get more advertisers.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's pretty insane to me. I don't know where I stand on this issue. I feel like a big flip-flopper, and I think I'm going to continue to just go back and forth. But I am like you. I'm very curious to see how this rides out.
Both of us, huge proponents of the Second Amendment or the First Amendment and being able to have free speech. And you and I are also both intelligent enough to know that it doesn't apply to private corporations, but it creates a culture. It changes the way that information is being distributed. And I fear that it's going to push people further towards the fringes. If they have to go search down a dark alley to find people that kind of align up their political views, there's no telling what else is lurking down that alley, I guess.